Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Assalamualaikum.
So thank you, Engineer Wajid Chatha, for joining us. Sir, can you hear me, by the way? Am I clear to you?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We all can hear you, right? Okay. Thank you.
That's good. That's good.
So we have our HOD electrical department here with us as well, who Dr. Ashik. He's also teaching power transmission with me. So me and him, we are teaching power transmission to this group of students. And so hopefully more students will be joining in with time. So we have Engineer Wajid Ali with us here today, who is an energy professional. I will not give a big introduction about him because he will actually introduce himself. So I will hand it over to you, sir. So you can start. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Air University and all the members who are teaching this course for inviting me in this session. And I would try to encapsulate as much as possible related to Pakistan's energy sector. And as you are aware that this subject is vast, like there are some universities who are offering courses about energy. There are some universities who are offering a complete degree in energy management. And then there are some universities who have dedicated schools of energy management. So this from here you can assess the magnitude of the content which this topic has, but I would try to encapsulate as much as possible in the time span which has been allocated. So can we start with the screen share? Please allow me a screen share. I would.
Yes, I suppose you can do that now.
Is it visible?
Yes, it is visible. Yes, sir, you can get started.
Okay. So let's start. A bit about me. I have 15 years and my voice is clear, no? Like it's clearly audible?
Yes, clearly audible, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, that's good. That's good. I have 15 years experience in both conventional and renewable energy. Currently, I am working with a CPEC project, CPHGC. It's a 1320 megawatt coal-fired power plant, and it happens to be the biggest corporate sector investment in Pakistan. I am a graduate from UET Texla, plus I have done MBA from IBA. I'm also founder of Pakistan Initiative on Energy. It's a social media portal. If any of you is on Twitter, the link is available. You can go and join, and you would find a lot of useful content, I hope, related to the energy sector. So let's start with our content or with our main core topic. Today we would get the power sector overview. Then we would go through different trends in energy sector. Then we would have some discussion about energy economy and tariff regimes in Pakistan. Then we would see the challenges which we are currently facing. And then in the end, we would see that what is the future outlook and what is the way forward in energy sector in Pakistan. I would keep this format that first I would present my case or like the content which I have, and then you guys can note down your questions, or if you already have, and then in the end we would take some questions and I would try to answer those questions. Would it be fine with you?
Fine with everyone here.
Okay, let's start. First, we get the historical perspective of energy sector in Pakistan. We started off with an installed capacity of 60 megawatt in 1947. Then the major key points in our history with respect to energy are in 1959, we established WAPDA. Then in 1964, with the Indus Basin Treaty, we moved towards hydel. And then in 1970s, we built some dams. In 1972, we also moved towards nuclear. Then the major point came in 1992 when the privatization of energy sector started. In 1997, NEPRA was established, so where we got all the unbundling, where MTDC was formed, later DISCOs were created. Like previously, you would be well aware that there was only single entity called WAPDA. But in 1997, with the induction of NEPRA Act, the energy sector was unbundled. In 1997, we had our IPPs coming into our system, HUBCO and KEPCO. These were the major IPPs which came in into the system in 1997. And with this privatization approach, we had a major influx and increase in our capacity. It increased from 7,000 megawatt installed capacity to 17,500 megawatt. And then in 2014, we had CPEC, and it again, like there was a huge influx into into capacity building of our energy system. And today, as of 30th June 2022, we have an installed capacity of 43,775 megawatt. So this is a brief about the historical aspect of our energy sector. Now we come to the regulators which are there in energy sector. As you are all well aware, country in general is heavily regulated. So same is the case with energy sector. We have two direct regulators. It's NEPRA. It was formed by NEPRA Act in 1997. It regulates electric power in country. Then there is Oil and Gas Regulatory Authority, or OGRA we call it. Then there are two indirect regulators. One is IRSA. Although it has more to do with the regulation of water management in country, but as you would see in my next slides, that our energy mix has a major content of hydel energy as well. So by virtue of that, IRSA also becomes a major player in our energy management system. And then there is another, it's basically not a regulator, it's a body called NICA, and it is responsible for energy efficiency and conservation measures in the country. In today's session, we would focus more towards electricity, because if we try to cover all the aspect of energy, it would be very difficult to cover it all in the time slot. So I would be more focusing towards electricity. This trend shows you the historical approach or historical perspective of our energy development with respect to our GDP growth. It is the case with the developing nations that in GDP, energy demand is directly proportional to your GDP growth, and the correlation is very much linear. And same is the case here. In the developed countries, the demand is not that much linear with respect to energy growth, with respect to GDP. But in the developing countries, it's very much linear, and it is a case here in this graph. You can see it. Then this is the structure of Pakistan's power sector. Overall, the power sector is administratively controlled by Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Energy or Ministry of Water and Power. It has an administrative oversight over it, and NEPRA has a regulatory oversight it. Then some major entities which are reporting or which are under the Ministry of Energy are AEDB, PPIB, PAC. Let me cursor so that I can point it out. AEDB, PPIB, Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission, WAPDA, NTDC, CPPA, and DISCOs. These are the major entities which are like directly under the Ministry of Energy. And then NEPRA has a huge overall oversight of the whole power sector. Then there, the private sector IPPs are there, KESC is there, renewable projects are there. So this is the whole outlook of our energy sector and major entities which are here in our energy sector. This is the segment overview of our energy sector. As you would be well aware that there are three sections of energy management. Number one is generation, then transmission, and then the distribution of the consumers. WAPDA and GENCOs are there in the generation, IPPs are there. KE is the only vertically integrated entity in Pakistan, so it has stakes in both transmission, distribution, generation as well. So when you come to transmission, NTDC, DISCOs, and KE, and when you come to consumer side, then there are domestic, industrial, agriculture, and government sector consumers. So then we come to energy value chain. Red one is the flow of energy, and blue arrows are the flow of cash flow. So you can see that it starts from the primary energy, fuel suppliers, oil and gas companies, then you come to water companies, nuclear, then you come to GENCOs and IPPs, then they provide electricity to NTDC, CPPAG system, and there are provincial transmission dispatch companies as well. NTDC supplies energy to DISCOs, distribution companies, and KE, and then that energy is being supplied to consumers, and then the bills are collected from consumers and a reverse flow starts. Now we come to sources of power generation. There are two key categories of sources of power generation. One is conventional, which we also call the base load power plants, and the other one is renewables, which are intermittent sources of energy. So in the base load power plants, we have thermal and nuclear. In thermal, we have oil and petroleum fired power plants, gas and RLNG fired power plants, and then we have coal fired power plants. And if we come to renewable, we have hydel, solar, geothermal, and biomass. Geothermal, we are currently, we have not been able to tap that aspect very much, but the others are very much in our system. And you can see that as of 30th June, our energy mix pie chart is given, where we have a major chunk of hydrogen energy installed capacity. Then we have RLNG installed capacity, imported coal also plays a major role, furnace oil plays a major role, and gas is one of the major contributors. So you can see that solar and wind are not that much of contributor in our energy mix as of today. This is a transmission network of Pakistan. The red lines, these are 500 kV AC system. The purple one is HVDC transmission line, and the green one are 220 kV transmission networks. The circles, these are grids which are like different voltage levels, And the squares or the rectangles are the power plants or IPPs which are installed at different locations. You can also see the location, geographical location of different discos as well. So if you have a bird's eye view of this whole network, it's more concentrated along the Indus River. So it's very much understandable that like it's more concentrated where the population density is more concentrated. So this is an overall overview of our transmission network of the country. Can we move forward?
I guess we can.
Okay. Now we come to trends in energy sector. Well, Pakistan is considered as one of like lowest consumer per capita of energy. Here it shows that US every person in US consumes 13,000 units of energy, whereas in Pakistan we only consume 657 units of energy. In India it's almost double, in China it's almost 10 times, and US it's almost like 20 times of our per capita consumption. So here you can well estimate that where in terms of industrial growth, because as I showed you earlier, the industrial growth is directly proportional to the demand of energy. So you can better assess that where we stand in our industrial growth with respect to energy consumption. Well, here are some key figures. We have currently installed capacity of 41,268 megawatt. It includes both KE and NTDC system. Then we have 20,000 kilometers transmission network, 236 transformers. These are all at 220 and 220 kV and above. And then we have 61,000 MVA grid capacity. In terms of consumption, 48.5% of our consumption in fiscal year 2022 was domestic, 27% industrial, 7.5% commercial, 9% agriculture, and 8% was consumed in the other categories of tariff. In demand side, in 2022, we had peak demand of 28,253 megawatt, and we had lowest demand of 11,143 megawatt. This is the comparison of mix of energy in 2021, and Pakistan's comparison is for fiscal year 2022. So you can see that globally, oil plays a major role in energy contribution. Coal is a major contributor, and wind and solar are still kicking on. Whereas in our case, we have thermal as major source, which has oil, gas, and coal. Then we have 25% hydel contribution, 13% nuclear, and only 4% renewable. This is basically the energy generated. It's not installed capacity, it's gigawatt hours. And this is the comparison of Pakistan's energy generation with the world energy generation. So you can see that in our case, we have relatively better hydel generation as compared to world, but when it comes to wind and solar, we are still lagging behind with comparison to world. By the way, these charts of Pakistan, they don't include K Electric. Then we come to tariff and energy economy. Well, first of all, we start with generation. In generation, we have major chunk of independent power producers. These are private power producers, and they have two modes of power PPA or PPA contracts. One is the long-term contracts, which have which are like about 20,000 megawatt of our installed capacity, and other is merchant plants, which are like just in an incubation stage. There are very small merchant plants like Fatima Energy and some of wind power plants, but majority of power plants in Pakistan's energy mix have long-term agreements, which we called as power purchase agreements, where the returns are guaranteed and the availability is also guaranteed or ensured. Whereas the merchant power plants, these are speculative power plants, and they are more utilized or more to do in a competitive model of market, and where they are used more for spot or balance.
Sir, Mr. Wajid, are you there? He's got disconnected. By the way, guys, I hope that you are writing your questions. Okay. Meanwhile. Okay, sir. I think.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible now. Okay.
Sorry for interruption. Okay. Can we restart from here, or you want me to move to previous slide?
Yeah, I guess we can have a look at the previous slide again.
Okay. We start with the energy economy, and we start with the type of generation sources we have. We have two major type of power plants available for generation. Number one is PPA based, which are long-term power purchase agreements, and those plants have guaranteed returns, and they have guaranteed, or they have to demonstrate a guaranteed availability in the system as well. Whereas merchant power plants, they are not, they are basically spot power plants, and which are used for spot or balancing mechanism. They don't have the guaranteed returns, but whenever they are utilized, they have higher tariff rates, and they are more speculative power plants. In Pakistan, mostly power plants are under the power purchase agreement mode, long-term power purchase agreement mode. But there are few plants which fall under merchant plants, like Fatima Energy is one example, and then there are some few wind power plants which are the example of merchant power plants. Okay, then we come to the generation tariff structure. Basically, generation tariff is composed of, and it is the case of long-term power purchase agreements. It composes of two components. One is capacity charge, and another one is energy charge. In the capacity charge, the capital cost or the fixed cost is addressed, and the energy charge, the variable cost is addressed. So the components of capacity charge are return on equity, fixed O&M cost, insurance, working capital, debt servicing, etc. And in energy, it's fuel cost or variable O&M. And then the plants are basically, due to the grid requirements, the plants are shut down and started up on the frequent basis. So the startup cost is also part of the PPA tariff. There are two type of regimes which are adopted in allocating a tariff. Number one is upfront tariff, and number two is cost plus tariff. So what is upfront tariff and what is cost plus tariff? In upfront tariff, the government of Pakistan or the regulator NEPRA, they issue a lucrative tariff to attract investment, and they issue it in the different categories. Like the recent upfront tariff was issued for the coal-fired power plants, where the coal-fired power plants under the CPEC were offered a lucrative tariff, and then the people from abroad, they came and invested in Pakistan. Cost, NEPRA gives leverage or liberty to the entity which is coming to invest in Pakistan, and they provide their cost, that this would be the cost which we would anchor to invest or install a power plant. And then NEPRA evaluates that, okay, if it is a competitive cost, then they evaluate and then they issue a tariff and corresponding to that cost. Now, there are two regimes in availability or operability of a plant. Number one is take or pay, and number two is take and pay. Okay, take or pay is more related to the guaranteed power plant. Guaranteed power plants, where a power plant, if the grid system takes energy, it would pay the energy and capacity charge to that power plant. And if government or CPPA does not utilize that power plant, then it would pay the capacity part of the tariff to that power plant. So whether government uses or does not use that power plant, the government is liable to pay some charges to those IPPs. The other option is take and pay model. This option is more applicable to the intermittent sources of energy like hydro, like wind, like solar, that where the energy supply is not reliable, it is intermittent. So then whenever these plants supply energy, CPPA or the government pays them charges, and if the energy is not available from these sources, then they are not paid. Now we come to consumer end tariff. There are 7 different categories of consumer end tariff. Category A is for residential, commercial, and general services. B is for industrial. C is for bulk supply. D is for agriculture. So it's these are different categories. Then we come to your electricity bills, and I have taken example of residential consumer only. The tariff is adjusted in 2 reoccurring phases. One is quarterly adjustment, another one is monthly adjustment. In quarterly adjustment, fixed or capital costs are indexed, like the variation in your currency or forex. These type of things are indexed. And if the fuel component, the fixed component of O&M are indexed, then those are adjusted. And in the monthly tariff adjustments, we have variable or energy cost components. So nowadays, everyone is suffering from this fuel price adjustment. So it's basically adjustment of actual fuel cost or actual consumption of fuel with respect to reference cost of the fuel which has been considered by NEPRA. Basically, I a little bit elaborate this mechanism that NEPRA issues a reference fuel cost at the start of each fiscal year, that for this particular month, they, based on the empirical data, they analyze that they would be having a fuel cost component of, say, like 5 rupees. But when the power plant actually utilize the fuel and they give invoices to CPPA or NEPRA, then NEPRA says that actual utilization of fuel cost is like different than the reference cost. So that cost is adjusted every month. Like if in October the fuel would be which would be utilizing, it would be adjusted in your December electricity bill. So it comes with the 1 month's offset break, and it is adjusted on monthly basis. Now we come to the taxes and duties in your electricity bills. There is 1.5% electricity duty on the electricity which you consume. Then there is 35 rupees TV fee which is deducted. Then you pay 17% GST at the cost of electricity plus fuel charge surcharge plus quarterly adjustment plus electricity duty. So all the cost would be summed up and 17% would be charged on that. Then you pay 17% GST on fuel price adjustment, and you also pay 1.5% electricity duty on the fuel price adjustment. And then the financing cost surcharge, like the loan which government has taken to set up different IPPs, its financing cost surcharge is also charged at 43 paisa per unit into your bills. So basically, these are the different components which are part of your electricity bill, in addition to the cost of electricity or the general tariff, which is determined by the government, by NEPRA. Then we come to the point that how these plants are operated. Well, there are some plants which are must run, like the nuclear plant, it is must run. Hydel plants, they are must run. Solar, it is must run, and wind is also must run. Whenever they would have some energy, that energy would be dispatched into our grid. But the thermal plants, they are operated based on economic merit order, that whatever the cost of energy is, based on that cost, every fortnightly basis, CPPA and NPCC, one is market operator, one is system operator, they tabulate a merit order, and the IPPs or the power plants are operated under that merit order for the next 15 days. Now, the recent merit order was issued on 16th September 2022. I have, like, there is an approach to average out the cost, but we cannot average out properly. It would not give a clear indication. So I have highlighted a few major IPPs or major power plants and their respective specific cost. This cost includes fuel cost and the variable O&M cost. So Uch is 9.16, Angro Thar is 4.4, and I have mentioned the source of energy, like their fuel as well. Then their Port Qasim on imported fuel is 18.65, Quaid-e-Azam Thermal RLNG 23.8 rupees, KEPCO is on RFO, it is 40.1, and Orient Power HSD, it is 53.8. So you can better make up your mind that what source of fuel is costing us how much, like per unit cost, in terms of fuel cost and O&M cost. Well, in this economic merit order, there is a provision that the grid constraint would also be considered. That if they at some place the transmission network is not available or sustainable, then the system operator can deviate from this merit order, and it can run some power plant which is maybe more costlier in terms of economic perspective, but keeping in view the grid stability, they have the provision that they can run that power plant. But NEPRA is like very much keen on auditing this aspect, and every month whenever there is fuel price adjustment hearing, they work out that whenever the power plants are operated out of merit order, they get the reason behind that, and they also very much like investigate that whether that reason was appropriate or not. Okay, Ji. In this slide, I have given a comparison of nominal to real tariff rate in 2022. So you can see that in 2022, domestic tariff is 18.58 rupees, commercial is 36.9, industry is 28.123, and agriculture is 16.84 rupees per kilowatt hour. In the second table, it's electricity data for the fiscal year 2021-22. Our total generation was 143,000 gigawatt hours. Average fuel cost was 9.34, and minimum generation in 1 month was 8,087 gigawatt hour. It was in February 22, and maximum monthly generation was 16,778 gigawatt hour. So I have put these figures to show you that our demand or electricity consumption pattern is very much seasonal. In summer months, we touch a peak of 28,000 megawatt. As I have showed you earlier in my slide, and in winter months, it comes somewhere near 11,000 megawatts. So our demand is very seasonal, and it is one of the major problems in our energy sector today. Then I have taken August 22 figures, and it shows you that the composition of our energy mix, 38% was generated from idle, 15% from coal, 12% from RLNG, 13% from nuclear. And the average fuel cost component was 10 rupees. So you can well assess that due to the recent hikes in the fuel prices, global fuel prices, it has an impact on our energy mix and ultimate cost of energy, because our substantial reliance is on imported fuel, on RLNG, on imported coal. So it is impacting our energy mix and energy costs. Now we come to challenges. As you guys would have witnessed in this summer that after some breather of maybe 2 years, we are again exposed to load shedding. And this year it is due to different phenomena. Previously we had availability or supply constraint. Like initially we had generation constraint, we cooped it up in 2016-17, but then for 2 years we had transmission constraint, but ultimately in 2019 or 20 we did not had any supply constraint. The recent load shedding is due to the higher fuel costs. Our country was not in a position to sustain such high fuel cost and supply electricity to consumer for 24/7 basis. So that's why the government or the policymakers they responded proactively, and I would say that it was a very good decision that they curtailed some of the generation. And because you know that we also have some issue of our reserves, and they curtailed the outflow of our reserves at the cost of, obviously it was like painful for the consumer, but I think you ultimately have to make some painful decisions to reach an optimal result. So this year in July we had a time where we had 6,000 to 7,000 megawatt shortfall in our system. And well, there are two categories of shortfall as well. I explain here. Number one is NPCC demand shortfall, and then there are high loss feeders as well. High loss feeders are those feeders where recovery rate is less than 50%. So government or the power distributor considers that providing electricity to these feeders is a huge loss on 24/7 basis. If the continuous supply is provided to those feeders, so they would cast a huge loss to the system. So that is why they, despite the availability of electricity, the distributor shuts power at those feeders on intermittent levels. So there are 2,000 megawatt feeders in our system which are considered as high loss feeders, and the supply is provided on intermittent basis, and there is daily load shedding of 7 to 8 hours on those feeders, even if the power supply is available. And then there was the demand shortfall on the NPCC feeders that was somewhere around 4 to 5,000 megawatt in July this year. Now we come to losses. Like this is a major problem in our system, that our system of transmission and distribution has huge inefficiencies. We have transmission losses of 2.6%. So if 100 units, let's suppose if 100 units are generated from a source, at the end of transmission system, it's 97.4 units which are available. Then there are 17% losses of distribution. These are called technical losses, but in actual, these are both technical and also administrative losses, that there is theft and all those things which I think you guys are well aware of that. So those are 17% losses. So 80 units are supplied to consumer, and then there are 9% recovery losses as well, 9.5%. So in the end, if 100 units are generated in the system, the distribution company or the government of Pakistan gets the recovery of 71 units. So there is a lapse of 29 units. So you can better make up your mind that if you have to pay for 100 units to the IPP, but you are getting the recovery of 70 units only. So that gap has to be bridged. And this would be our next topic, that is called circular debt, that ultimately, if the government does not have the fiscal capacity to bridge that gap, then that gap would be parked somewhere and it would ultimately pile up. So as of year 21-22, we had, in terms of capital, we had 72 billion impact of transmission losses. This is in rupees. Then 520 billion impact of distribution losses and 230 billion impact of recovery losses. So almost 900 billion losses are every year there in our system, which are ultimately parked somewhere, and someone has to pay for that inefficiency of those losses. And then 6 billion is the impact of free energy to the government sector or the ex-WAPDA employees. So you add all those things, and these are the losses which are ultimately a burden on the national reserve or on the taxpayers. Now, as I have built it up in the previous slide, when we have such huge losses, ultimately those losses are parked somewhere, and these were the losses of only like electricity supply. Then there are losses in the gas supply. Then there are losses in the value chain of oil supply, and all those losses become a vicious cycle, which we call circular debt. Major contributor to circular debt are transmission losses, commercial losses, recovery losses. Then there is delay in tariff adjustment. As I have explained you earlier, that we have two tariff adjustment regimes. One is monthly basis, one is quarterly basis. So when the fuel prices or your forex rate is stable, that does not cause much impact. But as of recent trends, the fuel cost prices are like changing almost on daily basis. There is like 200% increase in the coal price, 170% increase in the gas price. Oil prices, although they are recently they have come down, but they were also like they were facing 25 to 30% increase in May to July. So when you have such huge flux in the prices, the recovery rate or the delay of it also contributes into the inefficiencies. Then government allocates some subsidies, but they don't have the capacity to pay those subsidies, so those are also parked somewhere. Higher fuel prices, financing costs, and tax loading, ultimately like it results in the lesser recoveries. So it becomes a vicious cycle that all the entities in our energy value chain have some amount to pay to the other entity on which they are dependent. So this is a pie chart of the major components of the circular debt. Disco's inefficiencies, which I have mentioned earlier, they contribute 31% into the circular debt of Pakistan. Then delayed tariff adjustments, they contribute 35% into the circular debt. Unbudgeted subsidies, government announces subsidies, but they don't have the budget. Like I would not specifically mention, but back in March, we had an announcement from the government of 5 rupees per kilowatt hour subsidy. That subsidy was unbudgeted. So ultimately it got parked to the circular debt. Then the financial cost, and financial cost is both for installation of the IPPs, and then there is interest payment on the delayed payments to the IPPs, that if the IPP is not paid on time, there would be some interest on that payment, and it would also park into the circular debt. So as of 30th June 2022, we have a circular debt of 2.2 trillion rupees. Acha, here I would like to mention one thing, that although it's a huge genie in our system, but I think it needs a bit rationality. And I would give you an example that circular debt is like this thing that एक बेटा जो है वो अपने बाप से कुछ पैसे मांगता है, लेट्स सपोज कि वो 100 रुपया मांगता है, ठीक है, और बाप जो है, बाप कहता है उस लड़के की मां को कि मुझे जरा 100 रुपया देना, मैंने बेटे को देने हैं. तो वो क्या होगा कि माँ बाप को 100 रुपया देगी और बाप बेटे को 100 रुपया देगा, तो वो 200 रुपए जमा हो जाएंगे. 100 विच मदर गिव टू फादर, और 100 वो जो फादर ने बेटे को दिए थे. और अगर माँ बेटे को कहती है बेटा मुझे इसमें से 50 रुपए देना, मैंने सब्जी वाले को देने हैं, तो वो 250 रुपए हो जाएंगे. बट एक्चुअली इट्स द सेम 100 रुपी. सो यही अगर आप अपने हमारे जो एनर्जी स्ट्रक्चर है इसको आप देखेंगे, ये इसकी पूरे इसमें जो है ना फ्लो ऑफ कैपिटल की मैंने एक डायग्राम शो की हुई है. तो हमारी 51% जनरेशन जो है वो भी पब्लिक सेक्टर की कंपनीज ओन करती हैं. हमारा जो मेजर डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन नेटवर्क है, जो अदर देन के इलेक्ट्रिक, वो भी गवर्नमेंट ओन करता है. हमारे जो ऑयल सप्लाई या फ्यूल सप्लाई की जो मेजर कंपनीज हैं, पीएसओ, पीओएल, एसएसजीसी, एसएनजीपीएल, वो भी गवर्नमेंट ओन करती है. अब होता ये है कि ये सारी जो एंटिटीज एक दूसरे को के जिसके एंड पे रिसीवेबल्स हैं, वो सारा फिर सम अप होके और ये जो फिगर है 2.2 ट्रिलियन की, ये आती है. तो इन माय व्यू गवर्नमेंट नीड्स टू rationalize this mechanism of accounting of circular debt, और इसको नेट पेएबल पे होना चाहिए, और उसके लिए जो मेजर बेंचमार्क है उसको कंसिडर करने का वो है डिस्कोज के रिसीवेबल, के डिस्कोज ने कंज्यूमर से कितने पैसे रिसीव करने हैं, एंड दैट इज समवेयर अराउंड 1.6 ट्रिलियन। सो तकरीबन अगर हम इसको अकाउंटिंग के टर्म में थोड़ा रैशनलाइज करें तो 600 अरब रुपया जो है वो स्ट्रीमलाइन हो सकता है। बेसिकली इट वुड हैव नो इम्पैक्ट इन टर्म्स ऑफ कैश फ्लो और इन टर्म्स ऑफ अवेलेबिलिटी, बट एटलीस्ट जो फिगर्स हैं या जो आप कह लें कि जो ऑप्टिक्स है वो कुछ बेहतर हो जाएंगी हमारे इस सेक्टर की। अच्छा जी, कुछ और भी चैलेंजेस हैं। इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर जो है हमारा ऑब्सलीट और इनएफिशिएंट है। जेनकोस के काफी सारे प्लांट्स आउटडेटेड हैं, डीरेटेड हैं, एंड मैं इसमें एक दो प्लांट्स की एग्जांपल दूंगा। फैसलाबाद में जेनको के 3 डिफरेंट प्लांट्स हैं। दोज प्लांट्स हैव नॉट जनरेटेड अ सिंगल यूनिट ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिसिटी सिंस 2007। 15 साल हो गए हैं, लेकिन वो अभी भी आपके नेट में शामिल है, अभी भी उनको कुछ ना कुछ कैपेसिटी की पेमेंट्स मिल रही हैं। देन वी हैव अ मेजर इशू, हमारा जो मुल्क है वो एनर्जी पुअर है इन अ सेंस, जिस तरह मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया कि पर कैपिटा हमारी कंजम्पशन बहुत कम है। तो हमारे तकरीबन 5 करोड़ लोग जो है वो अभी भी उनको दे डोंट हैव एनी एक्सेस टू ग्रिड सिस्टम। फिर उसके बाद कंपेटिटिवनेस की तरफ आ जाए तो हमारी मेजर जो जनरेशन है वो लॉन्ग टर्म कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स के अंदर बाइंडिंग है, और इसमें सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम ये है कि मूविंग अहेड फ्यूचर में भी आप सबने देखा होगा आईजी से एक डॉक्यूमेंट इशू हुआ है, तो फ्यूचर में भी अराउंड 20 to 22,000 मेगावाट कैपेसिटी जो है दैट इज ऑलरेडी गारंटीड और कमिटेड। हमारा ये जो सेक्टर है ये हाईली रेगुलेटेड है, और इसके अलावा जो हमारी स्लोइंग इकोनॉमी है, जो जीडीपी ग्रोथ है वो भी इम्पैक्ट कर रही है इस सेक्टर की ग्रोथ को, बिकॉज द ग्रोथ ऑफ जीडीपी इज डायरेक्टली प्रोपोर्शनल टू द कंजम्पशन और द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिसिटी और एनर्जी सेक्टर। फिर उसके बाद एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी है। हमारा जो मेजर रिलायंस है एज आई मेंशन्ड अर्लियर वो इम्पोर्टेड फ्यूल के ऊपर है। ऑप्टिमम यूज ऑफ अवेलेबल फ्यूल भी मेजर एक चैलेंज है, बिकॉज हमारे पास इंडिजिनस कोल है, उसको अभी तक हम प्रॉपरली जो है वो टैप नहीं कर सके। और एक और मेजर जो चैलेंज एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी का है कि हमारी जो सीजनैलिटी ऑफ डिमांड है, हमारे यहाँ पे जितनी भी एक्सपेंशन प्लानिंग और एनर्जी प्लानिंग है वो पीक डिमांड पे होती है, वेयर एज एवरी ईयर वी एंड अप हमारा जो यूटिलाइजेशन फैक्टर है हमारे ओवरऑल एनर्जी सिस्टम का, स्पेशली द अवेलेबल इंस्टॉल्ड कैपेसिटी, वो तकरीबन 50 to 55% होता है। तो वो जो सीजनैलिटी वाला फैक्टर है उसको भी मिटिगेट करने की जरूरत है। इधर यू इंस्टॉल और यू हैव टू मच इंडस्ट्रियल लोड, क्योंकि इंडस्ट्रियल लोड सीजनल नहीं होता, और या फिर हमें प्लानिंग ऐसे करनी होगी कि हम फिर पीक को नहीं बल्कि अपना जो वेटेड एवरेज कंजम्पशन है उसको कंसिडर करते हुए अपने आगे एक्सपेंशन प्लान करें एनर्जी सेक्टर में। अच्छा जी, फ्यूचर आउटलुक क्या होगा? ये भी रिसेंटली ही नेप्रा ने पब्लिश किया है, आईजी सेप 2022 to 2031 डॉक्यूमेंट। तो ये आउटलुक होगा हमारा एनर्जी मिक्स का इन टर्म्स ऑफ एनर्जी जनरेशन। 2023 में वी हैव मेजर कंपोनेंट हाइडल होगा, इंपोर्टेड कोल होगा, आरएलएनजी होगा। लेकिन मूविंग फॉरवर्ड आप देखोगे कि इसमें हाइडल का पोर्शन भी ज्यादा आ रहा है, इसमें विंड का पोर्शन भी बढ़ रहा है, और इसमें सोलर का पोर्शन भी कंपैरेटिवली जो है वो इंक्रीज हो रहा है। सो लेट्स होप के हम इन टारगेट्स को अचीव कर सकें और अपना जो एनर्जी मिक्स है उसको मोर ग्रीन और मोर इंडिजिनस कर सकें। अच्छा जी, उसके बाद जो जो इमर्जिंग ट्रेंड्स होंगे और टेक्नोलॉजी ट्रेंड्स होंगे उसके ऊपर बात कर लेते हैं। जिस तरह मैंने पिछली स्लाइड में शो किया कि मूविंग फॉरवर्ड हमारा जो मेजर एम्फेसिस होगा दैट वुड बी ऑन आरई, जिसमें हाइड्रो है, सोलर है, विंड है। कंपेटिटिव मार्केट, इसका टेस्ट रन स्टार्ट हो चुका है और इस साल के एंड तक हमारे यहाँ पे कंपेटिटिव मार्केट जो है वो लाइव हो जाएगी। सीटीबीसीएम आप लोगों ने नाम सुना होगा, ये मैंने उसका एक जस्ट जर्नल ओवरव्यू दिया है। थोड़ा सा मैं आपको इसको बता देता हूँ कि अभी क्या मॉडल है और मूविंग फॉरवर्ड क्या मॉडल होगा। अभी क्या है कि अभी हमारे पास एक ही एजेंसी है, सोल एजेंसी है, मोनोपोली सीपीपीएजी, वही एनर्जी बाय कर सकता है और वो फिर आगे डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन कंपनीज को सेल करता है, डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन कंपनीज की अपनी मोनोपोली है, और वहां से फिर कंज्यूमर बाय कर सकते हैं. In this model, consumer and generators they would have the liberty कि वो bilateral agreements में जा सके डायरेक्टली, और जहां से एक कंज्यूमर जो है उसको फिजिबल लगेगा कि मुझे सस्ती बिजली मिलती है, वो डिस्को रेस्पेक्टिव डिस्को को व्हीलिंग के चार्जेस देगा और वो सस्ती बिजली जो है उससे खरीद सकेगा. एंड इफ देयर वुड बी सम लैब्स दैट वुड बी बिल्ट अप थ्रू द बैलेंसिंग मैकेनिज्म, जो फिर आपको मार्केट ऑपरेटर और सिस्टम ऑपरेटर दोनों प्रोवाइड कर रहे होंगे. स्मॉल लोकलाइज्ड डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर ग्रिड्स की काफी बात हो रही है पाकिस्तान में. अभी जो है कुछ हाउसिंग कॉलोनी ने डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड ग्रिड के लाइसेंस लिए हैं नेपरा से. एंड वी होप कि मूविंग फॉरवर्ड ये जो लाइसेंसेज हैं या ये जो अप्रोच है, ये जितनी ज्यादा होगी, जितने लोकलाइज्ड जनरेशन और डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सोर्सेज होंगे, उतनी ज्यादा एफिशिएंसी ज्यादा आएगी. अगर आप ग्लोबल एनर्जी ट्रेंड्स की बात करें तो हाइड्रोजन फ्यूल की बहुत ज्यादा बात हो रही है, बिकॉज एज आई मेंशन कि सोलर और विंड की तरफ फोकस तो बहुत ज्यादा है, लेकिन ये इंटरमीडिएट सोर्सेज ऑफ एनर्जी हैं. तो अल्टीमेटली आपको जो आपके बेस लोड है उसकी रिक्वायरमेंट को फुलफिल करना होगा. तो अभी दुनिया इस मॉडल की तरफ जा रही है कि प्रोड्यूस हाइड्रोजन फ्रॉम सोलर और विंड जनरेशन, और उसको फिर बेस लोड प्लांट्स के अंदर जब जब ये ऑफ टाइम होगा सोलर और विंड का, उसमें यूटिलाइज किया जाए. स्टोरेज बैटरी के ऊपर बहुत एक्टिवली काम हो रहा है, चाइना में बहुत ज्यादा काम हो रहा है. इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स, एज यू ऑल नो, लाइक मोस्ट ऑफ द कंट्रीज हैव अ टारगेट के 2030 तक उनकी जो इलेक्ट्रिकल व्हीकल है उनका जो नंबर है दैट वुड सरपास द कन्वेंशनल व्हीकल्स. फिर उसके बाद हाइब्रिड जनरेशन की बात हो रही है, हाइड्रो सोलर हाइब्रिड जनरेशन की बात हो रही है, विंड सोलर हाइब्रिड हाइब्रिड जनरेशन की बात हो रही है, कन्वेंशनल थर्मल सोलर हाइब्रिड जनरेशन की बात हो रही है. सो दीज आर ऑल द ट्रेंड्स which moving forward we have in our like energy mixes which we would see कि पाकिस्तान में भी अल्टीमेटली ये ट्रेंड्स जो है वो इंट्रोड्यूस हो जाएंगे. तो मैं कंक्लूड करता हूं कि जी मूविंग फॉरवर्ड ये तीन फैक्टर्स हैं जिनके ऊपर फोकस करना पड़ेगा. रिलायबिलिटी मेजर फैक्टर है. अफोर्डेबिलिटी हमारी इकोनॉमी के हिसाब से लाइक इट्स प्रॉब्ली मोर रेलिवेंट इवन देन द रिलायबिलिटी एज वेल. और सस्टेनेबिलिटी लाइक इंडिजिनस सोर्स की तरफ हम जाएं, हम अपनी एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी के ऊपर फोकस करें. तो और मोर ग्रीनर, जो आपको पता है कि आजकल क्लाइमेट एक्शन क्लाइमेट चेंज के हवाले से भी काफी सारा ज्यादा बातें हो रही हैं. तो हमारा जो ज्यादा फोकस है वो इन तीन एस्पेक्ट की तरफ होना चाहिए मूविंग फॉरवर्ड इन आवर एनर्जी मैनेजमेंट प्लानिंग एंड एक्सपेंशन प्लानिंग. सो दिस इज ऑल फ्रॉम माय साइड. नो आई वुड रिक्वेस्ट, अगर किसी का कोई क्वेश्चन है तो please feel free, and it would be a privilege for me to answer those questions. Thank you very much. Thanks for patience, and thanks for listening. Thank you.
Sir, thanks a lot for your excellent presentation. We all got to learn a lot, especially the current picture of our energy sector. And I don't think we would be able to get such a picture from anywhere else, which you have given to us today. So thank you very much for giving us this presentation. So now, I'll ask the ushers to take the mics to all the students who have questions. And please bring one mic over here for the faculty members as well. So we will start first with our faculty members and HOD, so he can start the Q&A session. And afterward, we will move on to the students.
Please, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. It's Dr. Ashik Sen. First of all, on behalf of Air University Electrical Engineering Department and my students, I thank you, Chatha Sahab, for valuable information and latest information shared with us. I have a very short question.
My privilege, sir. My privilege.
The companies, the IPPs you showed, some were having very high tariff, for example, maybe more than 40 rupees per unit. Is there any specific reason for these? For example, Orient Energy there was, and one more. What is the basic cause that they are producing on such a high rate?
Well, the basic cause, as I got your question, is basic cause is the recent high fuel prices globally. I just gave you one example. I gave you example of imported coal that at the time of inception of the IPP where I work, the price of imported coal was somewhere around $70 to $80 per ton. Now, recently that price reached $450 per ton. So it's almost 5 times increase in the cost of coal, and ultimately it resulted in the per unit cost of electricity, higher per unit cost of electricity. Like previously, we used to produce electricity. I'm talking about energy component at 6 to 7 rupees per kilowatt hour, but of late, due to this hike, we reached around 30 rupees per kilowatt hour. Same is the case with RLNG, as you would all have read in the news recently that due to the supply cutoff from Europe, for Europe from Russia, the Europe or those countries, the developed countries, they are rationing RLNG for their winter. So we have not been able to secure a single RLNG cargo for our winter, except for the long-term agreement with Qatar. So this basically is directly related to the global fuel shortage and the higher fuel costs. Ultimately, if the things would stabilize, these prices would come down. I Am I audible, Ji?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Sorry. I think there is some interruption in internet. So, did you got my answer, or should I again re-put it?
Got your answer. There were some other news that maybe this winter Pakistan will be without gas, even for the house cooking and heating. My second question is related to net metering, sir. We are hearing that the net metering price of the units which were delivered to the grid by the local consumers is going down, which means maybe it was about 19 rupees and now it is 9 rupees. Is it real or it is only the rumor? Because it will affect the person who have installed the solar system on their rooftops.
जी बिल्कुल सर बिल्कुल. Sir, the answer is yes and the no. Yes, in a sense that NEPRA has already conducted a hearing in this regard. Let me tell you that what was the previous mechanism and what is the proposed mechanism. Previous mechanism of the net metering buyback price was that the national average power price, that we also call the basket price or the average per unit price, was given to the consumers who sell electricity under the net metering laws. And that price, as of today's denominators, ends up with at 19 rupees per kilowatt hour. Now, NEPRA and Ministry of Energy thought that this is a very high price. So they have come up with an idea that national average energy price should be considered as the buyback price by the discos. And that energy price calculated by NEPRA for year 2022-23 is 9.53 rupees. So basically, this is the argument from the authority that instead of national average power price, they should now be giving or buying the units from the net meter consumers at national average energy price. Now, there was hearing in NEPRA about a week ago. I also attended that hearing. The general impression was that yes, NEPRA would be moving to implement this regime or this tariff change, but there is no final decision on this aspect yet. In my personal view, it should be the same as the average generation cost or the average tariff of the solar IPPs. Like recently, they allocated 11 rupees tariff to Zurlu Solar. So and current tariff of Qaid-e-Azam Solar is around about 22 rupees. So in my view, the average tariff of solar should be implemented to the net metering consumer as well. But let's see that what is the decision from the authority. I hope I have answered your question, sir.
Sir.
Ji, walaikum salam.
Question that do you have idea about the cost of electricity from the nuclear power plants?
Cost of electricity from nuclear power plants is somewhere around 9 rupees per kilowatt as of today.
Okay, and
it's basically per unit.
And NEPRA pay to those power plants or not?
Yeah, they pay to those power plants.
Thank you.
It has 1.2 rupees energy component and somewhere around like 7 to 8 rupees capacity component.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Sir, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I had a question that, as you showed previously, that there was a gap of 29% in getting back the cash from the consumers. So how do you fulfill that gap in discourse?
Please come again. Your voice was distorted.
So can you repeat? I cannot hear you.
Gigi, I can hear you. Please put it again.
I wanted to ask that the 29% gap, how we can fulfill that in discourse?
Well, how they can fulfill that? It's a very tough question, dear. Like obviously, in my view, we have to remove inefficiencies in our system, and K Electric is a very good example where at the time it was privatized, it had like losses of somewhere around transmission and distribution losses of somewhere around 37%, but now they have reduced it to 15%. So I think K Electric's model to start with, it would be fine that like installed and aerial bundle cables, smart meters, smart circuit breakers. So these type of things which need to be installed or capacity building of the discos be carried out. But I think moving forward, the best option would be either completely privatize these discos or at least privatize their operation and maintenance, just like we are following the model of Turkey and CTBCM. I think in distribution we also have to follow the model of Turkey, where they have their 12 discos, just similar to our distribution companies, but the operation and maintenance of those discos is privatized. So I think this aspect can be addressed with that. Another big problem, major problem, is that we have administrative issue with respect to recoveries. No, administration is with provinces and discos are entity of federal. So if we would provincialize these discos, that would also be effective for our like recovery problems, because ultimately the enforcement, administration, police, the district administration, all is under provinces. But the discos, they are federal entity. So the problem of coordination and cohesion is there. So these are some of the major issues that need to be addressed at the earliest. And in my view, this can bring some change to the recovery and losses rate. Thank you. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, sir, but why these measures are not taken yet?
There are multiple issues. You see that we have gone to IMF for almost 23 times. Out of these 23 times, 18 times they have mentioned or they have given the condition that privatize your discos. Ultimately, now in the last 2 or 3 programs, they have stopped mentioning this condition, because they know that we cannot privatize these discos. The unions, the vested interests, political interests are so much that we cannot privatize these discos. So first issue is that these discos are highly politicized, highly unionized, and the rate of government or enforcement of government is a bit low. Then there is another issue with handing over these discos to provinces. Now provinces are saying that okay, we are we are willing to take these discos under the province ownership, but at the same time we need that the generation from the respective province should also be given to the province. In this, KP's argument is that we are supplying the cheapest electricity in Pakistan through hydel source. Since the argument is that we are also supplying the cheap electricity through coal and through wind. So they are saying that, okay, you give us these discos, but at the same time, you also give us the generation sources as well. We would manage it indigenously. No problem for federal is that they have entered into long-term agreements with the power generation IPPs, like under CPEC and even before that. These are under 30 years agreements. So if federal adopts this approach that okay, provinces have their own discos, have their own generation, then who would take care of those long-term agreements? So it's a very difficult and tricky situation, and there is not a single answer to recovery of all these problems. It has to be through very strong willpower, very strong administrative enforcement, and obviously with an understanding that we have to consider it as a national cause to come out of this calamity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Ji walaikum assalam.
Sir, since we have seen that the installed capacity is much more than the demand, then why is there load shedding and a term commonly used for fall?
Ji, first of all, I think this is not true that the installed capacity is much more from the demand. Actually, you see that installed capacity has a few intermittent sources, like the net generation factor of our hydel generation is somewhere around 50 to 55%. Like if you see historical trend, so it's somewhere around 50 to 55%. So if we have installed capacity of 11,000 megawatt, we end up getting the net average output of 5,500 to 6,000 megawatt. Similarly, solar has a generation factor of around 20%. Wind has 30 to 33%. So ultimately, when you end up getting the net units, so that's why it is also recommended that always quote the energy figures into gigawatt hours or megawatt hours rather than quoting into the always quote energy rather than quoting power or instantaneous figures. So this is the first thing. Second thing is, I have already mentioned in my slides that this year we have just sufficient or maybe 10% surplus capacity, because there are a number of factors that have to be considered in the grid stability as well. We have to keep spinning reserve. I hope you guys are familiar with the term spinning reserve, that the grid system, in order to stabilize frequency and stability, have to have extra capacity equal to single largest unit of the grid system, and at the moment that is K2 and K3, like 1100 megawatt. Grid has to maintain this much extra capacity to keep the grid stability. So the capacity is not higher than our demand. The major reason is that the load shedding which we faced in this summer was due to the fuel supply. Actually, let me tell you that if the government would have decided, first of all, it did not have the capacity. We did not have the foreign reserves to buy the fuel. Let me be very honest about it. Secondly, suppose that if it had bought that fuel and it had provided 24/7 supply to the customers or consumers, I think our electricity bills would have been 50% more than what we have got in this summer, or which we currently are also getting because of the fuel price adjustments. So that is why I think I totally endorse that the government took a very wise decision not to operate some costly power plants, and they face some burden of popularity as well, and the consumers or the people of Pakistan also face some pain. But this is not only that it's happening to Pakistan. We see Bangladesh is facing the same thing. yesterday they had a blackout where the 80% of country went into blackout due to the supply shortage, and they have also the same problem, that it's not the capacity of generation, it's the capability of generation that is causing the load shedding in our part of the world in this summer. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The second question is, sir, since we have seen that there is a major contribution of high loss feeders in load shedding,
Gigi.
what could be the remedies of those high loss feeders?
What would be the remedies of those high loss feeders? Recently, they have taken a measure of AMI meters, like smart meters, you can call it, that they would give the trend. They would install it at the feeder. They would not initially start it with the consumer level, because if someone has a kunda, so what a meter can do, be it the smartest meter in the world. So they have started to install those meters at the feeders, and by that they would assess the trend of the dispatch with respect to the recoveries, and moving forward they would see that, like, they would have the real-time data, system operator and NTDC control system, and they would see that whenever generally the kundas are removed in the daytime and then they reinstall at the night time, so they would have the real-time accessibility of the data, and they would cut off the supply of that feeder. Then, as I mentioned earlier, it's an administrative problem rather than it's a technical or commercial problem. So the enforcement of the recoveries by the law agencies would be, I think, first immediate approach towards mitigation this problem. Like district administration, you see that most of it is politically governed. There are few constituencies where the strong politicians, they are backing the consumers of discos to have kundas or don't pay the bills. So, like, we have to rectify our attitude as well, if we really want to come out of this. Frankly speaking, the indicators don't suggest that we are heading towards improvement. Yeah, I hope I have answered your question.
The third question is about the net metering. Since nowadays a trend is going of net metering, so
Please come again. Your voice got distorted.
sir, my question is about net metering.
Gigi.
Sir, is there any disadvantage of net metering on distribution level?
There are two disadvantages. Number one is that like the back supply towards grid, like there are multiple. I am not saying that there are only disadvantages. There are multiple advantages of that. But since we are talking about the disadvantages, so there are two prime disadvantages. Number one is that the supply being sold back to grid, it's not a reliable supply. You are only selling your surplus energy. Your energy pattern or energy trend can change, can vary. So, but the grid planning is based on the fact of that there would be reliable, continuous, committed supply from all the sources of grid. So it would create a forecasting imbalance in the system if there are too much or too many net metering consumers. Then same is the case that since our infrastructure of grid is very vulnerable and very inefficient and outdated, so as you guys would be well aware that there are transients associated with the generation from solar. So if we have too much influx of solar in our system, that can cause some impact on the grid stability. And there is another disadvantage to it, that you would be aware that the solar generation does not provide reactive compensation. But reactive compensation is one of the major component of the grid stability. It's one of the major ancillary services. So these are a few basic disadvantages of net metering or net meter, or even for that matter, solar generation. So that is why it is recommended that an optimal mix of energy should be created in the system, so that the affordability, sustainability, and reliability. All these three aspects are covered in that energy mix. Yeah, I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I would like to add a few comments about your answer, sir. Firstly, when you were talking about the system operator from the utility perspective, that they are only able to accommodate as much power, or there could be imbalances and stuff like that. So I think the reason for that is because in our power system, in our energy sector, we are only doing this operation scheduling at one level, that is the highest level for the conventional generation and all that. And the distribution operator, or I shouldn't say operator here because it is simply a utility. It is a, so if we change our dynamics at the distribution level, so if the discos would actually become operators as well, so I think that problem would be further accommodated and it would get better. The whole scheduling process will get better. And the next thing is, since you were talking about reactive power and relationship with solar, so I think most of the inverters which are being marketed actually do have reactive support capability. Even though they are not functioned for that specific purpose, but still they can have reactive support as well. So because this is actually happening in the developed world, the solar inverters, they have the reactive capability to provide reactive support as long as we keep the power within the KVAs or MVAs, the rated MVAs. So
yes, I have mentioned it in our perspective. Obviously, globally, like there are countries that where RE has surpassed the conventional sources of energy. So, and obviously that is only achieved through the like state of the art inverters, which have very efficient filters installed for transient remedies, and which are providing the reactive compensation. But like, as you are well aware, I'm talking about the Pakistan perspective, that here probably the quality of inverters is also not that up to the global benchmark. And plus the reliability of the grid is also very vulnerable. So that's why we have to tread a bit cautiously in expansioning of our RE, or especially the solar regime.
I also think that NEPRA, when they developed the act or the standard for this net metering, so I don't think they actually allow the net meter, the PV source at the distribution level to actually inject reactive power. I don't think that is even allowed. Is that so? They are only
yes. At this moment, only the IPPs which are entering into the long-term agreement, they are liable to provide ancillary services to the grid. At the moment, the net metering consumers, they are not allowed to provide the reactive compensation or the reactive component to the grid.
So I think that we should move towards that, so that our system operator is not only at the higher level of distribution as well. So we would be not calling ISCO just a utility, but it should be an operator as well. So that
yes, actually, problem is that we don't have the tendency towards regional grids or the distributed grids, or for that matter, segregated grids. Yes, for the country like of 220 million people, there would be like multiple grids. I think each province, to begin with, each province should be a grid, a separate grid. And moving forward, each disco should be a grid. And that disco should indigenously manage and decide that what primary and what ancillary services, what quantity of it, what cost of it, it has to manage. But as you are very well aware with our system, that our system is highly regulated, highly centralized overall. Like it's not only the power or energy sector, almost all the sectors. So that's why it becomes very difficult to like have the trickle down effect of all these positivities which the world is already getting, and they are well ahead of us.
Are there any other questions from the students? Yes, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Ji, walaikum assalam.
I have a question for you. Sir,
Ji, please.
Pakistan has been experiencing a serious shortfall energy crisis, and to my knowledge, Pakistan has plenty of oil reserves, which are still left to be untapped. So my question to you is that Pakistan has, I guess, over 9 billion barrels of oil reserve and 105 trillion cubic meters of natural gas. Would it be sufficient to overcome this shortfall if tapped to this date?
Well, my shortest answer is that neither my professional competencies nor my education nor my interests are linked to geology, so I cannot comment whether we have though that capability or not. But I think no, I think we have to move forward from oil and gas. I think the world is fast moving towards like RE, solar and gas. I'm personally, I'm for that matter even against hydrogenation as well. So we have to keep our focus towards solar, wind, and our indigenous coal. I think we have to move forward from, in terms of electricity, we have to move forward from all these conventional sources. In my view, these are outdated primary sources of energy.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Ashik has mentioned that we have taken a lot of your time. Obviously, we are really grateful for that. So if you guys have more questions, you can always email Sir Ashik, Sir Wajid. You can email them. So that was our last question. Sir, we are very thankful for your presentation and all the descriptive answers you have given to everyone. So thanks a lot. Ideally, we would, the situation would be that you would be here so we could have a good chat with you afterward and have a lunch with you. So maybe in the future, hopefully you will be able to come to Islamabad so then we can have another session and have you physically present there over here. So again, thanks a lot. Thank you very much for giving us this talk. Everyone is very thankful. So I would ask all the students to give a big round of applause to sir.
Ji, thank you very much. And it was really an honor for me. I would have loved to be personally present there, but due to some professional obligations, I was not able to come in person to Islamabad. And I would love to have more interaction. I think our academia and industry, they have to have more and more interactions to get like main insight. Our industry is missing the research part, our academia is missing the application part. So I think with the collaboration of both, I think we can get positive results out of it. And it was a really insightful and interactive session. All the questions asked were very much relevant and genuine, and like I also enjoyed a lot in this session. So bundle of thanks, Ashik Saab, Saad Saab, and all the students. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, sir, love.
कैसे ये जो रिकॉर्डिंग हुई है हमारे पास